Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Shout Tech. The year 2000 was very much a wild one for Linux. There were quite a few attempts at bringing a Linux distribution to the masses, one that was easy to use, intuitive, and frankly could compete with Microsoft Windows. What many people thought was missing at the time, however, was a competitor to Microsoft Office. In this episode, I would like to cover Corel's attempt at competing with Microsoft Office on the Linux platform. In the year 2000, Corel rolled into town with the product Corel WordPerfect Office 2000 for Linux. Upon its release, Michael Copeland, founder and then CEO of Corel, called the release a turning point in making Linux a reality on the desktop. Corel Office for Linux was released in March of 2000. There were two editions. For $109 you got the standard edition, and for $159 you got the deluxe edition. In the standard edition you get a pretty typical suite of Office products. This includes the venerable word processor named WordPerfect, a spreadsheet application called Quattro Pro, and a slideshow application called Corel Presentations. You also got ClipArt Images, fonts, photos, and 30 days of installation support. They included Netscape Navigator and Adobe Acrobat Reader, which were already freely available elsewhere. For just $50 more, the deluxe edition came with everything the standard edition did, as well as Paradox 9, which was a database application similar to Microsoft Access. They also threw in Netscape Communicator, which added email, newsgroup, and other things to the Navigator web browser, and then they included even more fonts, clipart images, and photos. To top it off, you got a gold edition limited version of Railroad Tycoon 2 ported over to Linux by Loki Games. Finally, there's a cute little Tux mascot, or as the box called it, a Linux penguin bean-filled toy. So let's talk about what you would have gotten in a box. This is the deluxe edition. This is the one that would have cost $159. Unfortunately, whoever bought this never got their $40 cash back. That has long since expired from December 31st, 2000. So what do you get inside this one? You get all of this stuff. Let's open it up. So up here is your Linux penguin bean-filled toy. That's a pretty accurate size representation. Here he is unwrapped. Yep, definitely some little beans in there. What else? Pull this out. CDs. Disc 1. This one is the one that has the actual application. Disc 2 has all of the clipart and photos and fonts and stuff. You also get the open circulation edition. So this is not the full standard or deluxe edition you get when you buy Corel Linux. And then a copy of Railroad Tycoon 2, limited version. Your product authenticity card, serial number, and so on. Where you can get the source code for Corel Linux. A note that the character map in the library's catalog is not applicable to the Linux platform. Okay? So here's the library's catalog. This is everything that's on disk 2. If we take a look. So what? A whole bunch of fonts. Oh, I guess the fonts are on disk 1, but clipart is on disk 2. Photos and then textures. So this is everything that is on those CDs. So look at this, a ton of different fonts. A lot of fonts. Here we go, clipart. So all these little wonderful clipart images to make your presentations and your Word documents more cooler, I guess, for the business person in the early aughts. Ton of freaking clipart. Some photos. So again, if you were making a presentation for in front of your business partners, I guess you could use some of these photos. I don't know. textures for doing texture-y things. Oh, here's that character map. So, remember, character map does not apply to Linux. Process color chart. Yeah, okay. How to get your Corel Linux support, and then your user guide, telling us everything about how to install and use all of these applications. In order to explore Corel WordPerfect Office 2000 for Linux, I'm going to turn to my Premium Pentium 2 PC. This time I've installed Red Hat Linux 6.1 on it and am using the default GNOME desktop environment. I'm going to start by opening WordPerfect 8. WordPerfect 8 was delivered in both free and paid-for products that were native Linux binaries. Someone installing the new Office suite might already have WordPerfect 8, so let's see if version compatibility is maintained. I saved a very simple document in my home directory and quit WordPerfect 8. Now it's time to install this new Office suite, starting with inserting disk 1 into the computer. GNOME popped up the file manager window with the CD's contents, but double-clicking the setup file did nothing. I had to open a terminal and run setup from there. The setup program asks for the superuser or root password before proceeding. From here it's a pretty standard installer. First, I accepted the license agreement that I totally read all of. Second, I selected complete setup instead of minimal setup. Third, I clicked install. That's it. Super easy and straightforward at the expense of any kind of customization for the install. This was the same philosophy used in the installation of Corel Linux that had a simple 4-step installer. 4 whole minutes later, the installation was completed. The installer prompts you to log out or restart your application launcher, but I was pleasantly surprised to see GNOME automatically picking up the new applications. Overall, a very simple and easy install process for something on Linux in the year 2000. Now let's start WordPerfect 9. I had to accept the license agreement again. Now, this is where we get really the first indication that something is quite different with this Office suite. The first launch of WordPerfect 9 took over 2 minutes. There's a reason for this slow launch. The first time you launch a WordPerfect Office application, a new Wine environment has to be configured. That's right, Wine. For those not familiar with it, Wine is an application on Linux that allows you to run your Windows binary. Corel had decided for WordPerfect Office 2000 that instead of taking the time to port their existing Windows applications over to Linux, they would instead run them in Wine. There were some advantages and disadvantages to that decision. An advantage is, of course, that a company could release an existing Windows application for Linux with minimum development time. A disadvantage in this case is that the startup time, especially that first startup, could be painfully slow. I immediately ran into an odd problem with WordPerfect. Resizing the window kept moving the top bar and eventually the top of the application went off the screen. I later discovered I could just resize using the horizontal and vertical adjustments. Trying to use the diagonal adjustment resulted in the weird behavior of the application moving off the window. Flipping weird. I don't know if this is the fault of the application running in Wine, but that would be my first guess. Quirkiness aside, everything else in WordPerfect ran just fine. Opening the About dialog, you can see the application version and even set the application serial number. In my explorations, I never found a reason why you'd want to configure it. There is a mention of a pin if you called it a Corel support, so that's probably why you can set the serial number. Of course, like I expected, WordPerfect 9 opened the WordPerfect 8 document without any issues. I would have been very surprised if this did not work. But let's dig into that open dialog. Being a Windows binary, this dialog looks almost identical to one you would have seen on Windows 98. Instead of My Computer, you have the option for My Linux. There are even drive letters associated with removable devices. For example, A was the floppy and E was the CD-ROM drive. They at least show your system as a slash and a home directory as a tilde. Opening the Save As dialog reveals all the file types that WordPerfect 9 supports. Yes, there's a compatibility for Microsoft Word documents. WordPerfect Office came with a ton of fonts, much more than were already available in WordPerfect 8. Spell check works, although I had to open the actual spell check dialog before it identified the correct spelling for spell. There is a grammar checker called Grammatic. Results with it were, well, interesting. Alright, WordPerfect 9 is perfectly functional and usable as one might expect. Let's explore the library catalog. First, I dug into the fonts and picked out this one called Serpentine. That's not installed. All of the fonts are TrueType fonts and can be found on the disk 1 from the box. To install one of these fonts, use the application Fontastic Font Manager. After providing the root password, you are shown a dialog with all of the existing fonts installed. Some can be removed and some cannot. I clicked Add and browsed to the CD-ROM and found both font files for the Serpentine font and added them. After closing the font utility, I ran into this weird bug where WordPerfect 9 wouldn't launch anymore. A quick reboot later and I was able to get back into WordPerfect. I was even able to use the diagonal window adjustment after the reboot. Flipping weird. I just gave a big shrug here and moved on because the Serpentine font was installed and there were more fun things to do. Like ClipArt Images! There are hundreds of images and other graphics on the second disc that came with a deluxe box. Let's pick this tiger. I inserted the second disc and browsed the tiger ClipArt file using the file manager. All of these files have a .wpg extension and open in Corel Presentations 9 if you double-click on them. Inserting the clip art is actually quite easy. In WordPerfect, you can click Insert and then Clip Art. This dialog browses the CD, so it can be kind of slow clicking through it as the images are read from the CD. I found my tiger picture and inserted it. It was at this time that the moose had opinions and wanted a picture of a moose. Okay, moose, anything to keep you happy. That's enough exploring of WordPerfect. Let's take a look at Corel Presentations 9. Slideshows were all the rage in the year 2000, and Moose had a company meeting to prepare for. I chose the company meeting template and went to town. The interface for presentations was fairly intuitive for someone who's dabbled in PowerPoint, and I was able to create a couple slides for Moose to present at the company meeting. Thank you, Moose. Next, I wanted to explore Quattro Pro 9. This was a spreadsheet application, and much like the other applications in this Office suite, the interface was intuitive, especially for someone who had used Microsoft Excel. Just like Excel, formulas could be created by typing an equals sign and then clicking cells and inputting operations. The worksheets interface was interesting. Instead of just a normal 2 or 3 sheets, Quattro Pro automatically populates the whole alphabet. Deleting any individual sheet just replaces it with a new one of the appropriate letter. It was at this time that Moose reminded me to schedule a meeting with him to discuss his salary. CorelCentral 9 was a simple application for managing calendars, contacts, and other things. I scheduled a meeting with Moose for tomorrow at noon. I then decided to schedule a daily stand-up at 9 a.m. You could schedule meetings to be recurring, just like any other calendar app. CorelCentral had quite a few different options for scheduling recurring meetings, such as selecting which weeks or days of the month or even days of the year. I scheduled the stand-up to be a simple Monday through Friday until the end of the year. CorelCentral 9 allowed you to flip through different views of your calendar. There was the daily, weekly, and monthly views. Next to the daily view was a task list that could be used to keep track of things needing to be done. Another neat feature was being able to store contacts in an address book. Finally, you could create memos. I guess these were supposed to be a replacement for Post-its, since the interface even had that weird yellow color to it. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this product. On one hand, it was awesome that Corel brought over its amazing Office suite to Linux and ended up creating a very functional and usable product. On the other hand, it was disappointing that Corel didn't build Linux native binaries. I understand the appeal of using Wine to run their Windows applications, but I have to wonder if some of the quirkiness and slowness could have been avoided with native binaries. Probably not. Linux had plenty of quirks back in the day. And that's it for today's episode. As always, I can't go without asking you to press that thumbs up button if you liked this video. Also, if you want more of this retro Linux type stuff, please hit that subscribe button. The YouTube algorithms really like it when you do. Finally, I would really appreciate it if you left a comment letting me know what you would like to see next. Thanks!